So we're just going to pop into the platform really quickly, and I'm going to show you where to find some of these things. When you come to Aquifer, you have what we call the landing page, and then within the landing page, you have your custom courses and regular courses. My screen will look a little different than yours likely does, just because of my permissions, and also because of the content you subscribe to may be a little different. But one of the things that I want to show you is just sort of the idea behind what our courses are. So as Kim mentioned, these clinical excellence case sets sit up here. And so if you subscribe to any of these, like trauma-informed care, palliative care, high value care, diagnostic excellence, all of which were mentioned, these are up in this area. For each case set, there's a set of educator resources. That's this rectangular button here. If you click on that, each case, it'll take you to a guide for that set of cases. But we're just going to go down in here, and here's the core disciplines. Right now, I have all of them in here, so I'm going to go to family medicine. This is, I believe, our most common or second most commonly subscribed to course. So one of the things that I think is important for you as an educator to know is that when you go to these courses, if you subscribe to family medicine, you will have a view like this, where you have the case as it's presented to the student. So the student will see the same thing. Family medicine 1, 45-year-old female wellness visit. We know what this is. But in all these other cases, it's not revealed to the student what the final diagnosis is, just the presenting problem. But you as an educator get information on the side over here. And this can be really valuable to you to knowing a little bit more about the case before you assign it as a remediation case. So if you go in here, you can see like it says, the synopsis. So you get a quick synopsis, you get the final diagnosis, and then you're told if there's any clinical excellence curricular threads. So are those any pieces of clinical excellence that are brought in there as well? These can be really useful if you say have a student who needs high value care and you're looking for a case to put them in. You can find these curricular threads. I can show you where we'll find those as well. But the other thing is this case summary. And the case summary is really what gives you what the teaching is that happens in the case. Let's see, I have to share this tab instead. And I have to make that a little larger so you can see it. But you have access to this before the case. The students get this at the end of the case. So once they've completed the case, they have access to this and can use this to study from. So if you think about remediation, you've assigned to them a case that has some content in it that's really important for them to know, they now have a resource. And these are typically anywhere from 5 to 10 pages long and include the teaching points within them. So I'm going to switch over here and I'm going to share this tab instead. So I'm going to go back here. One of the things we'll refer to is gated versus ungated content. And I think this is also important for you to know. When a student enters into this platform, they go through the case step by step. So they don't get to see the end. And so when you assign them a case, you can sort of pick points within the case by going in there ahead of time and saying, you know what, I want you to stop at a card. Now they can work up to this card and I'll show you what this looks like. We'll go back into the same case I picked before, family medicine 4. Maybe we'll go in there. Okay, here we go. And once we get into this case, what you see here is these dark blue pieces. We call these cards, and they all have kind of a category, which is history, physical exam, clinical reasoning, and so forth. Within these, a student will only see this card alone, patient dashboard, when they step into the case. It'll be open like this. They have to continue to the next part. So one of the things that we often recommend about remediation is like picking a point at which to stop in the case so that then you can have a conversation with the student about that before they move on. So you might pick, going up through history and physical and having them actually stop at the summary statement, which is this first bit of clinical reasoning. And then you could do that together, or you could just say, stop at that point, and then we can review how that went for you. So if you're picking specific cases and spending time with students on that. So that's a way that you can use these cases. We have a couple of links, I think, Megan. One is about seeing cases as standardized patients that we're going to put in the chat. That's a link to a blog. And then there's another one about case summaries and using the case summaries and learning objectives. And we'll put those in the chat as well. These are just write-ups that people have done on our blog about how to use some of these tools. My former boss and the former chief academic officer at Aquifer used to say when her job was remediation at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She used to say, you should pick about 6 cases. So she had this kind of rule of thumb: don't deluge the students with cases, but start with picking with about 6 cases. And one of the things that she also would say is, we often pick the same cases, and so it's sort of getting to know a few cases that serve problems that students have commonly. So if it's around clinical reasoning, many of our cases deal with that. So if you have 6, 10 cases that you know pretty well, those are easier to pick. And you can learn those again by looking at the case summaries. One of the things in here is that this summary statement piece right here, so this, when the student sees it, this is actually closed. This gives them some guidelines. And then when they're done, they get this answer comment. When the student does this, they actually have this opportunity to receive feedback from an AI engine. This one isn't showing it because it's already been submitted, and so they don't get the option after it's been submitted, and it doesn't show their feedback. But whatever they submit here is also submitted to a report. So one of the things you can do is you can say, hey, I want you to work on a couple of cases. Here's the cases I want you to do. I want you to think about what you're going to write in the summary statement, and then I'm going to take a look at the summary statement that you've written, and we'll work on that together. And we'll talk about that. And so I'll show you where to find that in a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to show you how to find cases. So if we go back to the left-hand side here, you can see where it says we have our tabs on the left-hand side. I'm going to go to the home, but the place I'm going to go is content library eventually. So I'm going to go home first and just show you how else you can find the content library. I think I'm going to go home. Yep, I am. Okay, so the content library is also right here. So this is searching the content library. So we're going to go search the content library. And so once you go to the content library, what this allows you to do is start to find cases that might address the issue that your student is having. And so we have some filtering in here. And then once you pick the cases, then you can add them to a course, which we call custom courses, and assign those directly to students. So you might go in here and you might search for something like, let's see what communication comes up with. I'm assuming a lot. You can see that it's loading down here, which tells me it's searching. I also have a couple of filters set. I'm going to take those off. Cardiovascular doesn't matter, and adult doesn't matter, so I'm going to take both of those off, maybe. There it goes. Now it's letting me take them off. Okay, so if I just search communication, I come up with 42 matching items. So you can start to go in here and use this keyword search to find different items. And then you can see here what it tells me by this, by having these highlighted, is that the term communication was found in the learning objectives. In this case, it was found in the synopses. These light blue ones are integrated illness scripts. And I'm guessing that communication that it's finding is something about cell communication, which may not be the type of remediation you want, but this is what the where the synopses can be really valuable. So you can go in here and look through and find these cases in this way. You can also, if say you're only in family medicine, you can just select family medicine there, and it will only return the family medicine cases that come back with that term. So here we go, family medicine. These are family medicine relevant cases. So let's imagine that I found a couple of cases and I've said, okay, given my student's issue with communication, here's a couple of useful cases for me to assign. I can then go in here and add these. And so you just click add on these and you see how now it says remove. That means that I've added it to a course, add. And at the very top, it says create custom course. And what's really neat about this is that you can create a custom course and then add a student to it. So if you've decided, okay, I want to do these couple of family medicine cases, maybe this integrated illness script, and maybe the oral presentation cases, you can add those to a single course and then assign it to the student, and it shows up on the student's dashboard and says, hey, you've been assigned to these cases. So it's an easy way to communicate and for the student to keep track. So let's go back for a moment. And as I mentioned earlier, you can look at a student's summary statement. So let's talk a little bit, once you've gotten in there and you've found some cases that are useful to you, you've looked through the synopses and the case reports, you've created up a custom course. Now we have Amy's test course, and she's put a few students in here for remediation. And now she can just easily click this little button here that says view report. And there I am. I am remediating Family Medicine 8 and several other courses, palliative care. And in here, what you can do once you're in here is you can start to see how the students are progressing through the cases. So it's a very simple report to go through here. And then on top of this, you can click into these, or you can click into me and see how I'm doing. So I can go into Joseph Miller, JTX at Gmail, and let's just see how I did on this. So here I go. So in here, as I mentioned earlier, one of the good places to go through a case and a good break point is at the summary statement, because it's an actual clinical reasoning stopping point where the student submits it, it shows up in a report. You can see I've worked up to that point. So it took me 2 minutes to get there. I went through 8 pages. That's where I was told to stop. I submitted my summary statement, and next to it is the expert summary statement written by the case author. So if you were choosing to sort of say, hey, look, Joe is working on clinical reasoning. Let's do a couple of cases in family medicine. I want you to work up to the summary statement because that's a good proxy for your clinical reasoning. It'll show up in this report. You can look at that, and then you can have a discussion about that process. So we provide that tool as well. And so then the last thing that I'm going to mention before we bring on Kelsey and Cindy to talk about their experiences with remediation in Aquifer, I'm going to go back over here and I'll mention that we have some assessments that you can use. And Kim mentioned in the early part that we have Calibrate, which we call a formative assessment, and we also have the CDME, which is the clinical decision-making exam, which is seen as a summative assessment, but could be used in a variety of ways, and that's an internal medicine exam. And the way that you set these exams up, you can see I have some set up on my dashboard here, but the way you set these up is on this board over here. See where it says assessment, you click on this, and these exams can be given twice during a clerkship, or you can use them for remediation. So if you have a student who has struggled, you could say, okay, we're going to do a Calibrate exam, and you can use that to actually start to think about your study plan and how you're going to set up a study plan. And in fact, during the pilot, the first year that we were just trying this out, when we had kind of a stick figure of an exam set up, one of the main things that people contacted me about was like, can I use this for remediation? Like, can I give this to a student who has failed their end of course exam and just see if it helps them study? And it wasn't a use case that we had planned, but it certainly is a use case that people have decided is important. And so you can request those up here on this blue button. And to have access to Calibrate, you need to have access to pediatrics, internal medicine, family medicine, or radiology at present. So one of those 4 courses. And then starting in July, neurology will also have a formative assessment. And then to get access to the CDME, which is, by the way, a very cool exam, you will also have this blue button if you subscribe to internal medicine. So that's the other exam we have for internal medicine, and also an excellent clinical decision-making exam that can be used as a summative, or again, could be used to find some gaps in a student's performance and help them create a study plan.